All right, good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for the second session in our Starter Pack series. This series is for new to History Day teachers or people that are wanting a refresh or just to look at some of the resources that we might have. But the main goal is for you to walk away from these sessions with an understanding of the different components and aspects of a History Day project, but also tools to take back to the classroom and engage with your students and in general, not outside of History Day as well. So tonight we are joined by Dr. Frankie Nicole Weaver and by Kira Duke. We're going to be hearing from them this evening. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them as we get started. Dr. Weaver, who we're hearing from first, leads K-12 educational outreach programs for the University of Tennessee Knoxville's Institute of American Civics. Which is housed at the Howard H. Baker Jr. School of Public Policy and Public Affairs. She's also the Tennessee Civics Academy Director. Some of you may know her from that. The Academy is an annual conference for K-12 government, history, pre-law, and social studies teachers across the entire state of Tennessee. She loves any opportunity to train the trainers and to work with social studies teachers. She has a background in U.S. history, international relations, comparative civil rights, and cultural studies. And she also has experience in oral and public history and digital humanities. So she is, a full resource of lots of different things outside of just civics, if you're interested in engaging with her in those things as you look at topics. And then we're also hearing from Kira Duke today. She's an educational specialist for teaching with primary sources at Middle Tennessee State University. Which is a project of the Library of Congress. This program seeks to teach educators on how to utilize the resources of the Library of Congress and promote effective teaching strategies for utilizing those sources in the classroom. In her role at TPS, she's worked with educators across the state to offer professional development, which some of you may have experienced with her and I, and as well as lesson plans on their website and build out lots of resources for teachers across the state. And as of 2023, she is the Middle Tennessee Regional Coordinator. So she may be a familiar face for you. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now. All right. And just a few things about our evening. We're going to hear from Dr. Weaver first and then Kira. Dr. Weaver is going to be talking to us about the theme this year and then kind of looking at a few aspects of History Day through the lens of the Baker School and the things that they have in their collection and also multiple perspectives, things like that. She's going to hit on a couple topics for us. And then Kira is going to talk about developing research questions with your students and offer some strategies and methods you can use as you are working on that aspect of your History Day projects. A few things up top, make sure that your mic is muted unless we ask for somebody to share something out. Rename yourself if needed with your first and last name. Feel free to use the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. I am joining you from Middle Tennessee. I'm in White House, which is Sumner County. And just be aware we may ask for you to engage with us in the chat as well this evening. At the end of the session, I'm going to share a link to a survey. Use this survey to complete a feedback form for us, and I'll use that to develop your PD certificate. It'll be emailed to the address that is listed in the form that you use. So if you want that to go to something that isn't your school email for some reason, make sure that's the email you use there. And I'm going to try to have that to you by the end of September. So up top, I'm just going to talk to you quickly about the purpose of the theme in National History Day. The purpose of the theme, it serves a couple different functions. It ties all of our projects across the nation, across the globe together in a way that makes it easier to judge apples and oranges for our volunteer judges. But I think it serves a utility purpose for educators as well, because what we're asking of students is to develop an argument. And sometimes they've never done this before. Some of them have never had to use their own voice as historians. And that process can be scary and intimidating for some, or it can be exciting but hard to rein in. So the idea of a theme makes students look at a topic through a specific lens, which historians do all the time. So this year's theme, Rights and Responsibilities, is asking students to look at a person, event, an idea through that specific lens. inherent of that is an argument. Instead of them just telling you about Diane Nash, they're having to tell you about Diane Nash through the lens of this theme. And that makes it easier to move into the argument creation phase, as well as developing research questions, finding resources, all of those things. This year's theme is rights and responsibilities, and we are asking students to address both of those things, rights and responsibilities, within their projects this year. NHD says these are two powerful forces in history, but one does not work without the other. There's lots of resources that NHD has available for you. There's a great theme video. There's a theme book, digital theme book, as well as some resources like a graphic organizer that you can use to introduce this idea to your students. The theme video is about 10 minutes, and it's written with students in mind, so you can show it in the classroom. And it kind of offers this overview of the idea of both of those things and then connecting them together. We also have resources for you from Tennessee History Day on a Padlet that I will share with you in the email I send after the session. You will find links to all of those things, as well as some resources we've developed to help you. One of those is an educator roadmap that helps you plan out your History Day year. That has theme questions embedded in it, and also a theme introduction activity that talks students through the definitions of the different types of rights and responsibilities, social rights, civil, human, and as well as different types of responsibilities. And then they look at a couple topics through the lens of those things. All right. So now I'm going to stop talking and let Dr. Weaver take over.
Okay, can you hear me and see my screen? Yes, okay, excellent. So first of all,
we can't see your screen just yet.
Oh, you don't see it. Oops.
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, now do you see it?
No? Oh, wait, there we go.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so first of all, I just want to thank Nikki Ward and Kira Duke and Tennessee History Day for inviting me to speak with you today. So I appreciate that. And I come to you from the Baker School of Public Policy and Public Affairs, which is on the University of Tennessee, Knoxville's campus. And housed within this Baker School are two research centers and an institute, and I'm part of the Institute of American Civics. So I am calling my presentation Supporting Young Researchers in Exploring Rights and Responsibilities. I see a lot of overlap in what we do here at the Baker School with what National History Day does, and with what, especially this year, with the theme of rights and responsibilities. So let me continue. Here we go. The Baker School. The Baker School builds on the Baker Center. So former Senator Howard H. Baker Jr. established the Baker Center, and it recently grew into, in 2022, it developed into a school with the goal of developing skilled public problem solvers grounded in Senator Baker's legacy. Around the same time, the Institute of American Civics was created through bipartisan legislation in Tennessee. And it was created to combat the polarization that we're feeling across the state, and to renew our civic health and increase engagement, civic engagement across the state. In June of 2023, Professor Joshua Dunn became the Institute of American Civics' first executive director. We also have a board of fellows who gives us guidance, and I get to lead our educational outreach initiatives. So the theme of rights and responsibilities in histories It overlaps very well with what we try to teach our students and what we try to support in our educational outreach initiatives. So one of the things we do is we have a big teacher conference, and we also bring high school student interns to campus. And we ask them, why does civics matter? And we talk about topics like rights and responsibilities in history. We also lay the foundation, and we make sure that they know who Howard Baker Jr. was and how he was an important public servant. And we try to show the students the different ways that the school hopes to build on Baker, to build on his legacy, and to share the different resources that the university has. This year, something that we're doing that's new and exciting is I get to announce that we're having a special award with Tennessee History Day. So the Institute of American Civics, the new award is called the Institute of American Civics Award for Best Projects that study American constitutional liberties, including the significance of free speech and open ideas of exchange. So what we'll get to do through this is encourage both at the junior and the senior division students to explore topics that may have to do with the theme of rights and responsibilities tied to American constitutional liberties. And in particular, we're hoping that some will explore the topic of freedom of speech. And through this, we really want them to explore the topic of both freedom to speak and the freedom to listen. And so we're prompting them to consider the 1860 speech of Frederick Douglass, a plea for freedom of speech in Boston. And that this idea, this concept that to suppress freedom of speech is a double wrong. So this ties nicely with something that I got to do this summer with our student interns. So that it's probably the highlight of my year is working with our student interns that then support the Tennessee Civics Academy. And I also have a creative side, and we have a big rock here, and I wanted to paint it with the students. And I think that this ties to this topic of rights and responsibilities really well, because you have the ability and the right to paint the rock, and then at the same time, you want to know that whatever you put on the rock is going to be seen. And so you probably want to be responsible in what you want to put on there. And that the rock at Tennessee is a tradition. It even has its own web page. So it's live streamed, and you can see what's happening on the rock and when someone paints over something and things like that. So I think it ties really nicely to this topic. When I first told our students that we were going to paint the rock, I was really excited. And I warned them, I said, with great power comes great responsibility. Playing with Uncle Ben and Spider-Man, but also playing on Voltaire, the 18th century French Enlightenment author. And I think that this also ties very nicely to the topic of rights and responsibilities. We had also, the time before this, the session before this, we talked about digital citizenship, and we spoke with the students about how they want to present themselves online and how they should be responsible and thoughtful, but also recognize that they have this freedom to speak and and that their voice matters. So here's some of our students painting the rock. And we were getting it ready to welcome our teachers to the academy. So we had our theme. So then I wanted to give a little bit of advice tied to developing researchers. And oftentimes the hardest thing is to come up with the questions. So Albert Einstein, he reminds us, if he had an hour to solve a problem that was extremely important, he says he would spend the first 55 minutes just determining what the proper question was. And then he would be able to solve the problem in less than 5 minutes once he had that question. Now, oftentimes, I think that our young researchers, it's going to be a series of questions, and they're going to have to learn to organize them and discover which answers and which questions they really want to ask. Another suggestion I have, as a historian, as a parent who homeschooled during the pandemic, of different age children, and I honestly, I really think this is a good idea. I think that we should not neglect to use picture books and young readers, the secondary sources. So I encourage my researchers at the college level to start with well-researched books or articles on a topic. And I think having a time where you encourage your students to go to the local library, go to the university library, or well, probably the local library, and go to the children's section and visit and look at the books. You can find really well done books at that level, and it can help them as long as they have in the back of the mind, they want to keep thinking about the theme rights and responsibilities. So they want to keep exploring that, and then they want to read these books. And as they read these books, they can ask themselves, what did they find most interesting? What do they want to know more about? What piqued their interest? To look at the images. Also, these books have very nice timelines. They usually have timelines in all three of these books have timelines in them that are really well done. They have bibliographies, works cited, and they have our author's notes and indexes. And all those things can help our young researchers in thinking of what direction they might want to go. Then I say, building on that, you can continue with secondary resources. I would have them explore WorldCat, which is an international resource cataloging library materials, and just to see what's out there. I liked to do this on different topics, typing in different names. You know, if they wanted to explore Frederick Douglass, they will see that there's a lot out there, but it's also good to see what already exists, and what these authors, the perspectives that they might bring to the topic. And then they get to also explore primary sources. And luckily, I guess this is it's part of it, there was this shift to digitize everything, and then that got increased with the pandemic, which was kind of a good thing about it. And so there's so many funded projects through the National Endowment for the Arts, and other types of digital collections that we can have a lot of these things. So you can go and the students can find a plea for freedom of speech in Boston, the address delivered in 1860 that we were talking about in our prompt. But they can also find so many other resources that are very rich. Building on Frederick Douglass, they could go and find his memoir, his autobiography. And this is also free and fully online through documenting the American South and the National Endowment through the arts. So this brings us back to Baker, who is our inspiration here at the Baker School. He was a UT alum. He was a US Senator. He was the Senate Majority Leader. He was a White House Chief of Staff, and later he was the US Ambassador to Japan. What Howard Baker is known for is that he listened to multiple perspectives. He liked to surround himself by people who had different views and different points of views. And he would say different types of, we quote him all the time as saying like the other fellow might be right. Or he would say that I increasingly believe that the essence of leadership is to be an eloquent listener. So this again builds on that idea of rights and responsibilities. This idea of serving your country and also listening to other people and other perspectives. And I know highlighting different types of perspectives is also very important to National History Day. So again, for exploring and learning about Howard Baker, I would start with secondary texts. There is a book, and we have two professors here, Dr. Lyons and Dr. Sheb, co-authored this book with two other authors, The Government and Politics in Tennessee. So if students wanted to get more into local government and politics, that might be a nice secondary source to start them out with. And then they can explore the University of Tennessee Knoxville's library's digital collections. You do not have to be a student here at the University of Tennessee, and you don't have to work here to explore our digital collections. And this has a wealth of information. So again, I'm highlighting Senator Baker, but there are many digital collections in here. I was looking through it. There are a wealth of collections on oral histories and some wonderful collections tied to all different types and themes in history that then could also connect to rights and responsibilities. So those oral history collections are really valuable from this. There are different audio, visual, and photographs and speeches. And if you search Howard Baker, there are at least 3 digital collections that tie to Howard Baker. So we have collections of his speeches and remarks. So these are excellent primary resources. We have audio-visual materials. And then we have, I love his photographs because it's interesting to know that Senator Baker was also a professional photographer. And so he was involved on the Senate floor. He was chief of staff and he was ambassador to Japan, and he documented it himself with these wonderful photographs. So the collections of photographs are excellent, and I think students would have fun sharing them. And you can definitely find images that once again highlight this theme of rights and responsibilities, of working across divisions and working with different parties and different perspectives. Here he is with President Jimmy Carter, and they could be discussing the Panama Canal. Also, one other resource that the University of Tennessee has, which is neat, is if if you are a UT Vol, then you would have an entry in the Volopedia. So that's another fun place to look for biographies and find information on different local Tennesseans. And then you ask your students, okay, you looked at your secondary resources, you looked at your primary resources, you found your interesting questions and your neat topics. So what? That's what professors would always ask me. So what, Frankie, what are you going to do now? And this time for this, I made a poster. So this was a so what. We were trying to, encourage the legacy of Howard Baker and show that that he liked to sit down with his constituents, that he would talk and have conversations with people of different points of view. We had a map to show where he came from in Tennessee and where he represented Huntsville, Tennessee, and Scott County. And we have a famous picture of him during the Watergate hearings where he asked his famous question, what did the president know and when did he know it? So again, this is a way of saying, what are you going to do? How are you going to present it? Just like National History Day does so well. And all of these different things could tie back to the theme of rights and responsibilities. Here's another so what. So I did not come up with this, but I love this podcast. And I love the two governors coming together for this. And I'm including this in this presentation because I feel like after your students have that basis with the secondary articles and biographies, and then they add with the memoirs or the speeches and the different primary resources, then you could look at what's going on contemporary nowadays. And some of these conversations have historic connections. So that's why it's another great resource, as is place-based learning. So encourage your students to visit the Baker School, encourage your students to visit college campuses, to go to libraries, to go to free public lectures, and then to speak with teachers, with librarians, and with the presenters. These are some of our public talks. And then I just wanted to highlight that for our social studies teachers, we bring everybody together in the summertime through the Tennessee Civics Academy, which is our K through 12 educational outreach program. It includes, for the most part, social studies teachers, middle school and high school, but we also have some ELA and some criminal justice CTE teachers that participate and enjoy it. And there will be more information. You can always reach out to Institute programs at utk.edu, and I'll send you even more info. It will be in June. I just don't have the exact dates just yet. And you are welcome to email me. I'd love to collaborate and support National History Day and Tennessee History Day. So thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing and pass this over.
Thank you, Frankie. So that was tons of fabulous resources, and I think a lot of things that folks can think about and how to use with their students, for both, History Day projects, but also just generally in the classroom. So let me pull up my stuff here and see if I can make everything look right. All right. So as Nikki said earlier, I am Kira Duke. I work with teaching with primary sources at Middle Tennessee State University. I am also, as of last year, the Middle Tennessee Regional History Day Coordinator. So when Nikki approached me about what, how I might be able to contribute to this, we talked about, of course, asking questions. And in thinking about developing research questions for History Day projects, I immediately thought about some activities and exercises that we have utilized with our Teaching with Primary Sources program, and thought about how those things might translate to work well with history and to build that skill set. So I wanted to talk with you guys again about just some strategies and some tools that you can use to help students to build their comfort level with asking questions and their skill set in being able to write good research questions. Let's see, all right. So first question, of course, is how do we even begin to identify good questions? Because I think it really starts there. And this happens in a few different ways. So one, we need to understand the different types of questions that are out there. We need to ask lots of questions as a place to get started. And then we need to be able to evaluate those questions. Because while we like to tell students there are no such thing as dumb questions, there are such thing as bad questions, and some questions are better than others. So we need to be able to evaluate those. And we often have to be able to prioritize questions. Again, some questions are more important than others, and some we need to ask first before we can get to some other questions who may be better, but we need to have a preliminary answer before we get to those questions. And then throughout the entire process, we have to be able to constantly be refining the questions that we're asking and constantly asking new questions. I mean, that is the thing about research, and especially history research, is every time you answer one question, a new one's going to pop up. And so how do we get students to understand that process, to get comfortable with that process, and to grow in that questioning process? So in thinking about how to do that, I immediately thought about the question formulation technique. So years ago, we were at a Library of Congress Teaching with Primary Sources National Consortium meeting, and they brought in the Right Question Institute. If you're not familiar with them, Google them. They have some really great resources on their website. Their staff people took us through an exercise structured around what they have devised as the question formulation technique. I'm sure, like many of you guys, I've said it in a lot of workshops and a lot of activities, and a lot of them have been bad. This is one of the best ones I've ever been a part of. So good, in fact, that when we came back from that meeting, we immediately started thinking about how we could adapt this technique and use it in some of our PD. And have used it in PD over the years. I love to start some of our content-based workshops with this exercise as a way to get teachers thinking about questions that they want to have answered over the course of a workshop. And so again, I think in that way it relates really well to what you can do in a classroom. This PowerPoint is going to be shared with you, and I've linked this page right here to where you can find the explanation for the full thing with the Right Question Institute. You can register for an account with their site, and they've got tons of fabulous resources to support how this can be utilized in the classroom. But for our purposes tonight, I wanted to kind of talk through some high points of it and think about how it can be used, again, to help build questioning skills that will help to write good research questions. So if we were in a workshop, I would actually run us through the exercises, but doing it on a webinar, I'm just going to kind of talk you through some things. So with this, there are basically 4 rules. Real simple. There are 4 rules to this exercise that are really important. So you would start by, you could do this as a whole class. You could divide, your class into smaller groups. That is really just up to you and how you want to structure it. So you would start with picking a question focus. This could be a statement. It could be a primary source. It can be an image. It really can be anything, but it really is going to be the center point of the activity. So it's going to be the thing that you want your group to ask questions around and about. So once you've selected that, you introduce the rules. So first, the main point of this, ask as many questions as you can. You have the groups, they aren't stopping to discuss the questions. They're not judging the questions. They're not answering the questions. We are just asking questions. You're going to elect someone to be the recorder. That person's sole function is to write down every question that is said exactly as it is stated. And that is important because, it is possible that as you're going through this exercise, that you might start out with, someone might say, well, you know, why is this in color? Well, and then someone else might follow that up and, add to that, like, well, why is this in color, but kind of a monotone color? And so you would have like kind of two different questions and you'd want to record that. And so you could see again how questions evolve over the course of the exercise. And then finally, you want to change, if someone does make a statement, change that statement into a question. So if someone says, well, this is in color, well, then you would want to change that to why is the image in front of us in color. Now, again, I've used this multiple times. No group has ever successfully followed the rules. This always happens, whether it's adults or students, one, we have a really hard time not stopping to discuss and answer questions. It's like, I don't know, it's human nature. We really struggle with this, so that happens. It is also challenging, again, for the reporter to be able to note everything exactly as it is stated. So you really want to help to kind of guide your group through these exercises. When we have done this in the past, I usually do this for no more than 5 minutes. And five minutes is a ton of time. So again, 3 to 5 minutes is usually plenty of time that you can have the initial group go through and ask their questions. In doing this, also, from experience, you will have some groups who will come up with a list of 20 questions in 5 minutes. You will have some groups who really struggle. And so they'll, rapidly maybe, give you 6, 7 questions, and then it's just like silence. As they struggle to figure out again, what are the, to dig deeper and come up with what are the next level questions. And so that is part of the process. And that is good because I think it helps us to really kind of challenge how we're looking at something and really think through all of the different ways that we can, create inquiries and questions around a specific, again, primary source or whatever your question focus is. So after you have done that, after you've kind of worked through this process, what next? So you have this, huge list of questions, hopefully, that your group has come up with. You want them to begin to assess those questions. So in doing that, I usually like to start off with just, okay, let's think about what are the 2 primary types of questions. So we have open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. So working through a definition of those with students, so that they can understand what that is, thinking about what are like, when we think about, again, the 5 W's, which of those 5 W questions are open-ended, which of them are closed-ended, and helping them to identify that. We want them to think about how closed-ended questions and open-ended questions elicit different types of responses, how they elicit different levels of critical thinking, and what are the values of each of those. My favorite thing in doing this with teachers, and we talk about this question, is they will talk about their favorite thing in closed-ended questions is they are easy to grade because there is a clear right and wrong answer. And that's true, right? Usually with a closed-ended question, it's almost a 1-word response, maybe 2 words, but there's a clear right and wrong kind of response to whatever that closed-ended question is. Open-ended questions are going to get us to critical thinking questions, higher order thinking skills. We're going to have to, be able to connect some information. We're going to probably have to make an argument somehow within that. It's those how and why questions. They are definitely the more challenging questions in thinking about, when we are structuring research questions. This is where we want to wind up. We want to wind up with the why and the how questions with research. So after you've kind of talked through the different types of questions, their value, and thinking about, again, what are the priorities there, we want to go through and have our groups then characterize the questions that they come up with in their initial questioning period. So go through and identify each one, whether it's an open-ended or closed-ended. And again, think through, okay, well, how many open-ended questions do you have? How many closed-ended questions do you have? Why do you think that might be? Then it's good to have them select one open-ended question and one closed-ended question, have them rewrite that as a group to flip it to a different type of question. And again, it just gets them kind of challenging and thinking about how we structure questions and how we can move them from open to close-ended. So that's kind of one way to assess your questions, is kind of going through that process. The next piece of it is thinking about prioritizing questions. And I think when we think about research projects, prioritizing questions is really, really important, because we can have some really fantastic questions, but then when we get into thinking about, how we're going to proceed with research, are there going to be some questions there that, based on the sources available to us, we might not be able to answer? And it's important to recognize that. It's also important to recognize, in the grand scheme of things and whatever we want that final product to be, which of these questions are more likely to get us in that direction. So you would have groups go through and begin to prioritize their questions. What do they think is the most important question? What are their 3 most important questions? And then after they've done that and you're sharing this out, have them explain why. Why did you select these as your most important? Working through this process is really key to helping students, to helping teachers and adults, having us help to think about, again, the way we are structuring questions, what we are intending when we ask those questions, and really beginning to build out those questioning skills, because we can't write a good research question if we can't write a good question to begin with. And again, I think that is a skill set that even as adults, we oftentimes struggle with. Again, I know myself, and in doing this job for as long as I have, sometimes I will, ask a question and realize that I actually need to reword it because I'm not asking that question in a way that's effective, that's going to elicit the type of thoughtful response that I'm hoping to get. And so with students, I think that is definitely a challenge. And I've done this exercise before with middle school students. And I have found that they sometimes really struggle because they're not always accustomed to being the ones who get to ask the questions. They're always being asked to answer questions, not to ask them. And so empowering students to be able to ask questions and then working with them so that they are constantly improving that skill set is really important. Just in general in their education. But when we're thinking about doing research projects, is really going to help them so that, again, as they're going through the process and looking at their sources, they're constantly, again, refining what those research questions are. So that's the question formulation technique. Again, I think it's really can be really beneficial for helping to develop your research questions, but then also can be really helpful in a lot of other ways in your classroom. So I want to segue with that into primary source analysis. So again, we have our questioning skill set, but then I want to think about how we can combine that with our typical, primary source analysis and the typical tool that we use, especially with our Teaching with Primary Sources program. So if you've done one of our workshops in the past, I'm sure you are very well versed with this tool. And I know Nikki used this in the History Day Teacher's Guidebook that she created a couple years ago. So this is the one that the Library of Congress developed, the 3-question approach, where they have observe, reflect, and question. We'd like to simplify that with, what do we see, what do we know, and what do we wonder? So again, the third part of that, questions, having students basically, again, kind of go through that, process of asking as many questions of a source as they can come up with. But what do we do after that? And we don't always talk about this when we do our primary source analysis. But again, I think that this 4th step actually gets us into thinking about, again, developing research questions and can help students as they are doing research. And that is this part here at the bottom. And you'll note there's a section here on this, the guide that says further investigation. And this really gets us into thinking about, okay, now that we have all these questions that we developed in the question phase, what do we do with them? What sources are we going to look at? So is that other more primary sources? Is that secondary sources? We've got to prioritize those questions so that we can start to answer those that we come up with. And then we need to think about, okay, as we start that process, do I need to refine those in order to be able to look at these other sources? And so again, this further investigation step in primary source analysis is going to help move students towards good research questions. Again, thinking about the questions that they're asking as they are looking at additional source material. And I always like to, just reinforce, really the number of skills that students are using when they're doing primary source analysis. So thinking about this process, the skill set that we're going to have to utilize, we're going to have to like be able to read closely to determine what a source is telling us. We're going to have to cite evidence. We're summarizing key supporting, supporting details and ideas. We're going to draw inferences. We're going to have to support conclusions. We're determining central ideas and themes. We are going further in interpreting words and phrases. If we're looking at a visual source, we're going to have to think about, what is symbolism that is in there, lighting, coloring, the way things are placed. That is going to be part of interpreting that source. We're going to have to think about words and phrases. We're going to have to think about text structures, point of view, and purpose. And then as we get into the questioning and the further investigation step of this, we're going to have to think about how all of these things are interacting with each other as we're looking at the source or as we're looking at multiple sources. We're going to have to integrate information from multiple sources and possibly from sources in diverse formats. We're going to have to evaluate arguments and claims. We're going to have to address like how themes interact with each other over the course of multiple sources. And so again, we're so many different skill sets that are woven into our social studies practice skills that, again, are going to be really important for students as they're working through their History Day projects, are going to pop up just in doing their primary source analysis and working through the questions and the further investigation element of these, of a primary source, of a basic primary source analysis. So hopefully these two things can kind of give you a foundation to work from to begin to help students to build their questioning skills and to think about how questioning skills then feed into primary source analysis as they start to work on their projects. As you go forward, I invite you to take a look at our TPS website. The web address is here in tsu.edu/TPS. Under our tools page on the website, we have a whole host of different primary source analysis tools that are available for you. Some of them, they get into specific historical thinking questions. There's the basic analysis tool. There's tools that will help students to work through multiple sources at a time. So a lot of things there that can be very beneficial for you. We also, of course, have a lot of great primary source sets, themed guides, things like that that can also help direct students to primary sources that will help them in their research process. And again, I really encourage you to take a look at the Right Question Institute and their website and the question formulation technique and think about how you can utilize that. There is one other thing real quick, and let me see if I can share it with you. This is a tool. Let me find it. Where are you hiding on my computer here? All right. So this is a tool that you can download from the Right Question Institute. And so this is something that you as a facilitator can use to design the activity. So, what is the topic for the piece that you're doing? What do you want students to understand by the end of the lesson? Why are you using the QFT for this particular lesson? At what point do you plan to use it and think it'll be most helpful? How will the students' questions be used? So again, helping them to not only just develop their questions, but then how are we actually going to integrate that into the learning? And then really thinking through what is your question focus. And I will tell you, and having done this multiple times, selecting a good question focus is probably the most challenging part of this. Because you really want to make sure that what you're using is going to lead to the types of questions that you're hoping to elicit from your group. You want it to be provocative and interesting, but not biased or leading. And again, that is a very fine line to walk sometimes. So that this part of the exercise, I think, is the one that's a little bit trickiest. And something that they recommend in here is actually having someone to kind of test your question focus. So again, that can be very, very helpful. I can share this form with Nikki to share out as well, because again, I do think that this is a nice little resource to have to share. So if that's all that I have, if you guys have questions about any of the resources or things that we've mentioned, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to quickly show you guys the Padlet where I have a lot of these things linked, and where Dr. Weaver is going to share her PowerPoint. I have Kira's PowerPoint, so all of those will be available to you after the fact and in the future. So let me share this with you really quick. So this is what the Padlet looks like. And any of the videos, let's say you miss a session. I know several people are having weather-related things going on tonight, so they're going to watch the recording of this. It will live here, and you will fill out the PD form that is linked right there. That's how I will send you your PD certificate. And then under each session, will be the resources from that session. So if you missed THD 101, that is here, as well as some of the resources I mentioned. You can still fill out the PD credit form for that. And I will try to get those to you quickly. I wanted to point out the theme book and the theme video that I mentioned earlier are both here, as well as you guys are the first people to see this, the theme zine. This is the first time Tennessee Yesterday decided to take a swing at developing something like a theme book. And you guys are seeing our logo for the year. There's Norris Dam. And within it, it starts at the front with some things to keep in mind as you begin teaching the theme. The and is important. Let the theme guide developing research questions. Some of the things we've talked about tonight, as well as a link to the activity I mentioned. And then pieces from each of the Grand Divisions. We reached out to several state parks across the state, and as well as cultural institutions. We got a library down here as well. So it's a really interesting way to engage with your local history through the lens of the current theme. Don't forget to think local. Sometimes kids really enjoy getting to be a part of the community there. And then I was just going to show you rightquestions.org is the Right Questions Institute, and there's a lot of stuff on here. So you can kind of start up here with resources, and you can see there's lots of options, but when you click resources, they'll highlight a few things that are new. You'll see all of them here, and you can look by idea over here on the side. So there's a lot to discover here. So I am going to leave the last few minutes for questions if anybody has any. I am going to share the survey link here really quickly. While I have that pulled up in our chat here. I just sent that to just Dr. Weaver. Let me make sure everybody gets that. All right. And I hope you guys are able to join us next month in October. We're going to actually hear from Dr. O'Donovan, who's here tonight. She's going to talk to us about using primary sources to lift up to scaffold student instruction, their projects, and how to use primary sources effectively as the piece that helping you make your argument. And then we're going to hear from Amanda and Becky, who are both here tonight as well, about building their projects, how students, the process through which they help their students navigate building of the projects, because sometimes that's the biggest thing to tackle is like, okay, they've done their research. What's an exhibit board? How do we do that? So they're going to talk through some of their strategies with us. Yeah, no questions so far, but again, thank you guys for joining us. And I will share, if Kira and Frankie are okay with it, I will share their emails as well if you guys have questions directly for either of them, and in my email tonight. And thank you both for speaking tonight. I really appreciate everything you had to share. I think it was very helpful. And I look forward to hearing from our speakers next month. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick.
Yeah.
I didn't have a question, but I'm just really appreciated what both Frankie and Kira brought, but particularly formulating a question, because that's really where students, that's an often skipped step, and they jump straight from picking a topic to doing a research. But the thing is, and we'll talk about this more next month, because it really does then directly connect to actually using the sources to develop an argument, because fact of the matter, if you don't have a research question, you don't know where you're going in the archives. And if you don't have a research question, you have no answer to defend or to write about. So the research question is absolutely key, and I cannot wait to get into that. What is it? The Right Question
Institute. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I was just thinking as Kira was talking, I said, I want this for my graduate students because they struggle too. So everybody's going to practice this. So thank you.
Let me hear, I'll share that right now while we're talking about it. Make sure. I'll send it again later tonight, but if you're ready to dig in there tonight, you got it right there. Great. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight, and I look forward to seeing you guys in October. Thank you again to Dr. Weaver and to Kira. Good night, everybody.